6 o'clock, I will call this meeting of the Juneau Utility Commission to order. Roll hasn't been taken. I need a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Cheryl, second by Ross to approve the agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Minutes of the previous meetings.
Wasn't that your personnel one,
We have a motion. Motion by Cheryl, second by Bart to approve the minutes of previous meetings. Any corrections or anything on it? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Public appearances. You're first, Matt.
All right. So I'm thinking probably every other month or so, I kind of come in and just give everybody a status update, and then let you guys kind of lob questions at me or give me feedback based on the design. So going to the handout here, so recent developments, we recently did all of our geotech work out on site, where we had somebody do the soil borings, we take that report, and then that goes into the design of things. So we don't necessarily know the exact location of things yet, because it's still preliminary design, but we made a grid pattern of the site and collected borings all over, so we should hopefully have a good snapshot of the borings. So we'll use that during design, we'll also use it during construction. Some of the other things before we get to the garage is we're also working on the oxidation ditch design. It's actually gotten a little bit smaller. We honed in that design. And then we were at the site recently, we did piping and instrumentation verifications and pretty much spent a day out walking the site, looking at everything and making sure that everybody's kind of on the same page and getting the most up-to-date information. So the garage, we had a separate meeting about that. I know that everybody's had a lot of feedback here, so I'm hoping as part of preliminary design is we kind of put the main design aspects behind us and we can march forward. I know the cost of it is a concern, so one thing I'd like to do is in the bid we can actually break it out and then you'll get a specific number, and then at award time you can say we award the base bid and we include the garage, or we award the base bid and we don't include the garage. So it'll kind of give you some bit of flexibility. And it's a little bit easier with the garage because it's like a separate piece of the project. It's not like you can award half the oxidation ditch, right? So kind of helps my job a little bit. So we talked about the material construction. For the sake of costs, with our architect, we talked about a pre-engineered steel building versus like a tip-up building. Pre-engineered steel being the cheaper version. It's about 12 feet high, at least for the garage doors. And then we weren't going to do any fancy wrap around the building. We were going to just have stones around the building for easy maintenance on the outside and stuff like that. So the facility plan estimate, I want to say, was around $800,000. Talking to the architect, based on this design, is between $300,000 and $500,000, and that's based on one of the recent bids. It wasn't really apples to apples, but there's still also some contingency in there as well. And obviously we do that because, one, it's still preliminary design and some things may change. We might learn something as we are working through the months here. And then a perfect example is just like the market, what's going on right now. So instead of telling you it's going to be $354,000, I know $300,000 to $500,000 is a pretty big range, but it has gone down from the planning side of things. So I know the garage is a big topic. Any major concerns on that?
Did you include any inside finish, any liner or anything like that?
It'll be, well, we'll work out some of those details, but I don't know. It'll be something so we can spray down vehicles or whatever else is gonna be stored in there.
You gotta protect the insulation.
Yeah. So, and heating wise, I know Alex had some current concerns about, can we use the boiler system, or do we put in, you know, some type of, electric heater? So that still has to be worked out. The boiler, can we tap off the existing boiler? So. Any questions or comments on?
Would that require air makeup then, with them driving vehicles in and out?
It depends what we officially decide to put in the building, so.
Or what you send to the state for
Yeah.
approval?
Yeah, well, so what we'll, put in the report for DNR's approval too, and then, for the state, so. What we discussed was really having simple exhaust fans, you know, keeping it as simple as possible. So. Seem reasonable on the garage? I think the biggest thing, hopefully, or the most helpful thing is hopefully the breakout in the bidding, and then you'll actually be able to see that number. And then when I was on site with Peter, he mentioned that the roof, you had somebody go out there and look at the roof. So the scope of work of that hasn't been really investigated yet, but we talked about adding that to the project. So.
What are you finding on the roof, Peter?
20-year-old roof. We had found leaks inside the building it was staining the ceiling tiles. And on further investigation, we had contractor come out and do an inspection, and basically it was more than those two guys could do, so they were gonna be sending out one of their estimators to come out, but it's looking like the whole roof needs to be replaced.
Is it still leaking now? I mean, are you still having issues with it, or it's been stopped somehow?
It was during the heaviest rains, so
Yeah,
it's
we really didn't
only
see
gonna be,
anything like this weekend or anything.
it's
like
not
that.
dramatic, but it's
Well, by
coming.
the time you got water coming in, it's
Yeah,
not supposed
it's
to.
coming. By the time we get the new roof, it'll be due.
So we'll work with Peter and everybody at the plant. We'll figure out exactly what needs to be done, and then I'll talk to our architect and estimate how much it'll cost. So we'll probably have to talk to the inspectors that came in, or have somebody else come out and look at it. Well, then the other thing that I just remembered that's not on your sheet is, I also learned a couple weeks ago that you guys had conversations with the sheriff about the shooting range. Part of planning was we kinda always planned on moving that if we had to, but where we're putting the ditch now is to the west of the package plant, so as of right now, I'm thinking we won't impact the shooting range. So.
Wasn't the chemical building supposed to be placed closer than the ditch though?
Over there, yeah. We have a little leeway where we can move things a little bit north, but we still have to figure out how the chemical truck can get in there. You know, we're thinking a delivery really once a year. And so, the chemical building was supposed to be up by the ditch, but we could potentially, I don't know, maybe move it off the hill. So, all of the final structural locations still have to be determined, but we're really sizing the ditch, all the buildings, and stuff like that. We're kind of moving the puzzle pieces around.
I know Chief Beal had said by and said that he was concerned with moving the shooting range, so I know that was a concern that you were voicing.
Yep, so
Yeah, he indicated that they needed at least 150 yards from the berm, so that's maybe the ditch would need to be moved more to the north.
Wasn't it 50?
No, it was like 100.
150 is basically to the driveway.
No, I thought it was more than that. I said it was 150
150
yards, and they're shooting
feet?
rifles.
Maybe.
Yeah, 'cause they got that red mark that's on the fence.
have to get a hard number from you guys and see where that falls.
Can that chemical building be accessed from their driveway?
Yeah, actually, we were talking about, that would be the oxidation ditch driveway
Yeah.
as well, so. I don't, do they stand in the driveway to shoot?
No, it's to the side, but they're shooting beyond the length of where the shed.
They're past
they're-
their structure.
Not that that's the safest thing anyway, but yeah.
You're supposed to cross the driveway to get to the ditch, so. So, okay. Some upcoming steps is I'm still working with Peter and the crew to look at the oxidation ditch and the storage tanks. One of the bigger ones that I talked to Alex about was the boiler replacements. So right now we're looking at smaller units, which might not be desirable, but the key thing there is the international building code. If it's over a certain amount, then the room has to be fire rated, or you have to put in an automatic sprinkler system. So, that's from my HVAC designers, and that's what we've done in the past. So, everything on the inside has to make sure that fire can't pass through it over a certain period of time, I think it's an hour. Yeah, and then all the,
It's basically a block room, it's three
Yeah.
doors, it's gotta
Yeah.
be closed.
but then all the penetrations would have to be potentially modified, so.
There any dampers that leave that in?
There's fresh air dampers on the outside wall.
Any
Yeah,
trigger,
so-
whatever.
What we typically do is we have a number of units, and then when you really don't have heating requirements or very little heating requirements, you can really turn your system down. And you know, aren't running the whole thing, so. They're, still commercial sized units, they were 97% efficient, is the ones that we were looking at, but we're coming up with a couple different options, so if we go the fire rated route, you know, what will that take if you guys really don't want 3 or 4 small units?
Well, depending upon how that building is zoned, maybe it makes more sense to have multiple units spread throughout the building.
Yeah, you don't
I don't
even-
know how that thing is broke down as far as heating circuits, but maybe you're better off, you know, dedicating a closet area for each one of the smaller boilers. I'm not in favor of those low mass boilers, but that's gonna be what you're gonna be stuck with to be able to comply with the fire code, so.
Yeah, so, yeah, we could potentially put smaller ones in different areas of the
Right.
plant. But the other thing is, we're double checking to see if that large boiler, do you really need all that capacity? You know, maybe it was oversized in the past, so.
Well, the new ones come with multi-stages too, you know, you can fire them up, you know, 33%, 66%, or 100%, you know. That's also another option, but like Alex says, that building is essentially a concrete block room right now, other than maybe getting fire doors in there and taking care of those dampers and penetrations, I would think that would be able to.
I think the ceiling's even precast.
Yeah.
It's precast.
Yeah.
Isn't there fire doors on there?
It's
I don't know
already
if those
steel.
doors are rated fire door or not, Peggy.
I would
Okay.
imagine they're steel doors, I mean, they gotta be closed.
If they're hollow on the inside, they're not.
I don't know.
But if you only gotta spend whatever, a couple doors and damper actuators and stuff, it's not the end of the world. But
How many pumps do you have on that system?
for,
So there's only,
Pumps on the wall.
if you had to trace those circuits down, you might be better off remotely having boilers rather than pushing that water all the way from the boiler room all the way to each.
Doesn't the one pump seldom get used though, correct?
so really only 2 of them get used all the time. So, yeah, that's gonna be kind of the hard part though, cause one's gonna be auxiliary heat for extra
Like a
heat for the
boost,
lab, yeah, and then the other one is actually just the makeup air unit for the sand filter room, which doesn't even work right now, but I'm assuming it's gonna be replaced. So you would eventually need that, but.
Yeah, so our upcoming task is to really list out all the heating requirements verify that they're all needed,
I
and
don't know that
then.
we'll ever get below 400 though.
No.
Yeah, well, then say, how much do you actually need, what's your minimum, what's your maximum, and then we can say, do we want one giant one, do you want two?
Hard part is, it would be nice if we could split up the main loop, cause we have basically one big pump that does the entire plant, and then one little one that does the office area. So if you could split up that main plant loop, it might be beneficial to your smaller sizing abilities. Cause the main loop heats the entire plant, other than the office area, so.
So yeah, our HVAC designers will start digging into that now that we're hopefully approaching finishing final, or preliminary design, so. We'll come up with a couple different options and then present them. We're working on, like I mentioned, the site plan. We don't exactly know where everything will be located, but we're determining where that has to be, and we'll be showing the plant staff the location of everything and making sure that it all makes sense. At the same time, we're working on our 30% cost estimate, so I'm getting updated numbers from all the manufacturers, the suppliers, getting lead times. Electrical equipment has extremely long lead times, so that'll kind of have to be worked into the bid. And then sensing stuff, we're hoping that keeps on moving forward as well. So. And then my last update is on funding and principal forgiveness. So with the infrastructure bill, there's a lot of money that's been doled out. The wastewater side of things, they're thinking about, or all that money, instead of making new programs, they typically push it to existing ones instead of making all new rules and setting up all new programs. So the Clean Water Fund is what we're looking at for the city. And so the details still haven't been released. They recently did the Safe Drinking Water program, and so I put an example on there, is that theirs was increased from a 60 to 65% grant, and then their max value, or their maximum dollar grant was $500K, and they increased it all the way to $1.5 million. So, and their pot of money went from $7 million to $20 million. So really there were significant increases for water and also wastewater.
Do you know any information about Pond's recent plant upgrade that they just did? They were awarded $7.5 million of the grant money. I don't know what. I know I heard of the IIJA, which I don't think they would qualify yet because that money's not available quite yet. But I'm just wondering what the process is for your underwriters to reach out to as many grant opportunities as possible, because $7.5 million is significant as far as.
Yeah, normally, so in the facility plan process, we work with our funding team and they list out all the different funding sources. And then there are specific requirements that you have to meet. Like median household income is one of them. And then also, I believe there's a percentage below the state MHI value as well. And so it all depends on where the community falls and if you qualify for it. So Juneau was qualified for 30% for Clean Water Fund. And then some communities are qualified for 15%. We talked about rural development, and they also have grants, but that was also the 40-year loan versus Clean Water Fund is the 20-year loan. There's CDBG, the block grant, and that also has to do with some of the income measurables in the community, and I believe you guys fell just outside of that range. So if it was like for a street project or something like that, a lot of times you can do a specific survey of an area to see if that area is impacted more and you could possibly get more grant money that way. But part of the facility plan process is where we reviewed all the different options and kind of weighed, you know, how much grant you could get, so. I'm not specifically sure what they got there, but for Clean Water Fund, there's two kinds of grants. There's your general grant, so that's, right now it's $750,000, and then there's phosphorus, which is up to $1 million. And then your percentages go into play on that. So if you have like $1 million project, you can't get $750,000 in grant. You can only get 30% of the $1 million. So, but the one thing that we don't know, something is changing. We think for the better, right? So maybe the 30% will go to 35%. Maybe the $750,000 will go to 1.5 million. So, and that really benefit, you know, the whole city, including Sensitive. So yeah, last thing is, so once we know more about that, we'll then have more cost estimate, or better cost estimates based on today's numbers, and we'll know grant money, and then we can double back and look at what the sewer user rates will be. So, and then the very last thing is the recent scores came out for the DNR, and they list all the different communities that apply for Clean Water Fund. And so every year we put Juneau in there and other communities. Just, it doesn't make you have a project, but if you want to have a project, you can then apply for it. So the city's score was 81, and then if you look at that funding list, it went from like 150 all the way down to 40. And so you think 81, that's not a very good chance. But a lot of people do what I do is, and you get on the list to make sure that you have that option in the future. So, for example, this year, the high score was 97 and the low score was 50. And so your score of 81 would have been fourth highest on the list that received grant money. So the 81 is a really good score. So I know there's been some talks of like the grant might not even happen and stuff like that. And I can't say it's going to happen for sure, but based on history, which isn't always the best way to measure things, you guys still have really some of the top chances to get grant money.
Okay. Any questions for Matt? All right. Gentlemen, you're next, I guess.
So I want to reiterate that I do not have any authority to make any decisions regarding the service agreement. My role is to take the information and the documentation that you guys provide and to share that with our corporate group in Milwaukee, and then to communicate to you guys any information, any questions, or any comments that they might have.
Could you introduce yourself?
Well,
first?
surely I can do
It's
that.
fine.
Sorry,
Some of
my
us
name
haven't
is,
met you.
My name is Jim Vermillion. I'm the corporate EHS engineer that offices across the street at the Juneau facility, and I'll let John introduce himself.
I'm John Long, I'm the plant manager over there. Appreciate the invitation to the meeting. Like Jim said, you know, anything of this kind of magnitude obviously has to go through our Treasury Department and that type of thing. We're very much interested, Matt mentioned, you know, moving the project forward. We're very much interested in moving the project forward and, you know, having an opportunity to discuss it a little bit, get a little more information so that we're better armed to move it along is what we're here for as well.
All right, so that being said, I did sit down with our legal team on Friday. They did provide a little bit of guidance on what next steps look like. First of all, they communicated that since long-term bond agreements can negatively affect stock prices, it's not something that Sensient enters into without some considerable vetting. So that's part of the reason for some of the holdup. They did say that before they consider the service agreement, there was some additional information that they were going to need to have added into it. I can go through what those particulars are. It's not a whole lot. Don't know if you have the service agreement in front of you or not, but I did make a couple extra copies if anybody needs them. I'll just set them on the table. You can feel free to grab them. I'll just hand it to him. That's even better.
You should have copies in the book from a couple months ago, I think.
So down at point 6, it talks about the plant being constructed so it'll facilitate the treatment of Sensient's wastewater. They will need a inclusion of exactly what our capacity is. So at last time we talked, Matt, I believe that was 493 thousand gallons, 190 pounds of BOD, 190 pounds of total suspended solids, and 40 pounds of total phosphorus. They'd like to have those numbers in there. Down in 7, it talks about, as an example, if the funds borrowed for the project are over a 20-year term, Sensient's repayment will also be 20 years. They need to know what those terms are before they can sign the agreement. If it's gonna be 20 years, that's great. If it's gonna be 30 years, that's great, but they need to know in writing what they're agreeing to before they'll sign it. Also says currently it's estimated that Sensient shall be responsible for 34.1% of the total project costs. Is that subject to change? I guess I'm asking you.
No.
Okay, so if we could just make that a definitive statement instead of a estimated statement, that'll go a little ways to getting this done. Down in 9, it says, further agree that Sensient will bond itself so as to guarantee the construction cost allocated to it will be paid as set forth above, whether or not they continue to use the plant during the period of time that the indebtedness exists, said bonding arrangements to be approved by the commission. They're curious if there would be an option to do a lump sum pay, just pay it all in advance and be done with it. And if so, they would need to know what that lump sum would look like. If not, we need to have a number. I understand you guys can't give us a definite number, but, and the example they used is you wouldn't agree to buy a car if they told you you'd find out in a year what the car cost. So a not to exceed value would work there, but they need something that they could take to the board and say, hey, it's gonna cost no more than this much. So if we can't get a fair estimate, a pretty close estimate, a not to exceed will work there, but they need to have some kind of a number.
Can I chime in?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think I emailed this to you. So what we were thinking there is, like, we aren't gonna know the number until the bid actually happens, right? So I could take my best guess at it. I might be really close, or I might be off. So what we were proposing is, we're expecting four million-ish. We were gonna add 25% of that and say do not exceed that number. That way, if you go a little bit over or a little bit under, it wouldn't, I guess everybody would throw their hands up and everything. So maybe the 25% is negotiable, but
I think that's realistic, and I think if you do that and then you take into consideration that there could potentially be grant money, that would give you more of a buffer in the end than we would anticipate.
Yep.
So I think that's a good starting point. And then the last one, point 15, talks about Exhibit A. They need that attached to the service agreement before they'll consider it. So, I mean, nothing obscene, but they need that information before they'll consider this. Once we have that information, I can resubmit this to our Treasury Department. They'll send it to our legal team for review. The legal team will then provide what they call a red line comment copy back to you guys. If you agree with their request to change certain language and, you know, dates, addresses, whatever else they might ask for, then they could submit it for approval to get signature. If not, then we start the negotiating on where to put periods and commas and whatnot. You know how lawyers are. So that's kind of where we're at. I wish I could give you guys more information, but like I said, I don't have it.
Anybody have any questions for them?
Jim, what's the time frame when we provide you the information and you're like, okay, we gotta take it back to finance and we gotta take it back to legal? I mean, our city has to continue to move forward.
And I understand that you guys have been very open with your communication about that. I try to communicate that to our group at Milwaukee, but I'm kind of at their mercy. I can't even begin to tell you how much time they'll take to review it. It's completely out of my hands.
And that being said, I mean, we want to move forward as well. I mean, the future of what I consider my plant over there depends on the city of Juneau moving forward. It depends on us being able to work together. So we're going to push it as hard as we can, I can assure you of that. It's just that once it gets to Milwaukee, sometimes they have their own timetable.
I think I said that when I talked to you, Jim, I think we said that every time we this gets put off longer and longer, the cost keeps going up. I'm afraid that's a rough, hard way to put it, but it's a fact.
And I definitely understand that because
We get that.
we're seeing the exact same thing with our projects as well, and so I absolutely understand the motivation, and I'm with you. I wanna move it forward quickly and get the thing done and get us underway.
Anybody have any questions? Okay.
Who of our group is responsible then to get them the information that they requested? Is that coming from your office then, Matt? Is that?
Yeah, I think our funding team, and then I'll get involved in some of the, like the flow and the BOD and all that stuff. And then I think Nicole and Mary have been, calling over as well, so,
Has Exhibit A not been given to you? Is that,
It
It's
wasn't
just not
attached to the
attached
service
here.
agreement. You're talking lawyers
Right,
and
but
board members.
do they have it, I guess is my first question, because
They
I
have
don't
a-
want them to come back
They
with
have
that
a
and
copy
say,
of it from November, December, when it was
Yeah, there
first.
I think there was one
provided.
on one of the other
Yeah.
contracts or whatever we sent over, but I don't know if it was attached to this one. Okay, Tom, I'll leave this in charge of that.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, is Exhibit A, that's the one that has all of our limits as far as
Right.
BOD suspended solids and all of that on there?
I believe it would be your rate schedule.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
this,
The
not
penalties and-
The charges and all,
Success penalties, yeah.
okay.
And then, for what it's worth, I'll be out of the office tomorrow, but if you wanna give me a holler on Wednesday, I can go through that a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
Make sure you know exactly what we're looking for. I'm not gonna write the feverish either. And at one point, one of our legal team asked for the contact information for the city's attorney. So I was really hoping this was gonna get handled lawyer to lawyer, but it doesn't look like that happened. So we'll continue to do everything we can to move this along.
I had them, I gave you their number.
Yes, you did, and I shared that with our legal group, but based on the fact that we're still sitting here, I'm guessing that they didn't talk, so.
I talked to the city attorney, he said, no, he hasn't heard from them, so.
Jim, as long as you're here, I do have one comment or question, I guess. So once we started this and we gave you guys Exhibit A, I noticed since then that the lab results for our samples have gone up considerably. Like our RE300 use has gone up considerably, as well as the amount of loads of sludge that we've had to haul out. Is that due to like corporate saying, you know, because they gave us these numbers, you can get your limits a little closer to where they're letting you go to?
I don't believe that's the case, I think it's just been unfortunate timing. And I'm hoping that those concentrations come back down.
Yeah, because I
We
know
had-
we were in single digits for BOD suspended solids, and even your orthos and total phosphorus were way less than 1, and that has not been the case for months now, so. I guess I just wasn't sure. I mean, we're just trying to figure it out, cause I mean, 6 loads of sludge a week is considerably more than 2 a week like we had been doing. And not only that, but I mean, our chemical usage, we were using like 8 to 9 gallons of RE300 a day, and now there's days we're up to 24 to 28 gallons when we get really bad loads that come in, so. I mean, the cost part is a big problem just from what we're having to spend right now, so we were kinda hoping too that those numbers could go down, so.
So we've been asking our sludge applier to do a land application for about 5 months, 6 months now, and there's always been something that's prevented that from happening. It happened last week, and they're continuing to do it once the weather allows them to do so. That should make things look a little bit better right away, and then we're hoping they'll continue to trend in that direction.
Okay.
We did get the invoice from Vitech today for the sludge hauling, and normally we have somewhere like 8 to 10 loads a month, and we had 32 last month.
That did include, cleaning out one of the waste basins.
Yes, that was on there, yes.
But still,
Right.
that's quite a bit more. So I know, and I think, Peter, you had reached out too, if you guys ever have an issue with Mona from Vitex, said she'd be more than willing to discuss that with you guys if you need another option, so.
Yeah, it's a matter of, so The way it works, our sludge hauler has the fields approved through the DNR for us.
Okay.
So we would have to get those fields back from them and give them to someone else to do that, unless they were destroying the sludge. Now, if they incinerate it like Green Bay does, then we can look into that. But if it's land application, it gets sticky.
I'm not entirely sure how she would handle your situation, cause we don't land apply, ours goes to Waupun, so.
Okay.
But I know she's hauled to United and other places for us as well, so I mean, it would be a conversation you could have with her if if you'd like to get in touch, I don't know cost wise or whatever, but she just mentioned it if you guys, needed.
Yeah, and it's definitely something we can look into. It's,
Yeah, I would definitely like to do that. Let's check that out, because sometimes we need a little help, so I appreciate the information.
And Tech land applies for other places, so they should know to handle the paperwork and all that stuff.
Right.
I kind of got the impression that the farmers and United have kind of handshake agreements on that, and they may be less apt to let somebody else apply on their farm fields, but it's definitely worth looking into.
So are you permitted or is United permitted?
So the fields themselves are permitted to us, but United does all the land application on them and has been forever. So United interacts with the farmers and the fields, whatnot, but the DNR has the fields licensed to us, but United holds all those certifications.
Okay. All right, thank you very much for coming.
Excellent.
Thank you for having us.
Somebody want us to leave?
No, you can stay if you want. If you, did you drop breadcrumbs on the way over so you could find your way back?
We left a ribbon, so we're just gonna follow it back across. Hopefully there hasn't been any traffic, otherwise we're gonna be in trouble when we get to the road. Thanks
It
again,
is
appreciate
Juneau.
it.
All right.
Thanks again,
Yeah,
appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, moving on, monthly business. Approve the vouchers and the checks. Have a motion by Ross, second by Cheryl to approve the vouchers and the check. Any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Prior month income statement. Anybody have any questions or concerns on that? If not, we can move on. There are no council acts affecting the utility. Consumption and loss.
On the consumption and loss, once again, we have Peter using more water than we pump.
I'm creating water.
And he was out, so I wasn't able to check
That was
with you on
due,
that before.
actually, the deficit due to the jail's water meter. I was gonna speak
Oh,
about
yeah,
this.
okay.
The displays, there was something going on with the displays on the meter on the high side and the low side. WPPI was out here, investigating what was going on with it. Came to the determination that displays were old and they were not functioning correctly. So, I got a hold of Midwest Meter and in Jackson and was able to take two displays down and have them programmed for the high side and the low side. So, did that and then put them back on and they seemed to be working for a while and now they're acting up again. So we think it's a mechanical thing. So I called into a couple people, to get some information on parts to rebuild them or things like that, or if it's
Yeah, a few months ago, we had some, our report was showing readings were gradually getting slower and slower, or less and less and less and less. So we initially did a site inspection on it, and the meters had some warning tags on the displays. So process elimination, you start off with electronics, communications, so that's why we did the new meter registers and radios, and put the new ones on, and they still aren't reading anywhere close to what they should be, even though we verified that they're programmed right. And like Peter said, it seems mechanical that the readings became slower and slower and slower. It's not like it just stopped reading it and no gallon usage came through. So, like you heard from Peter, you reached out now and see what the next steps are.
Okay. Any other questions on consumption and loss? Review totals of delinquent customers. It is coming down, slow but sure. Anybody have any thing on that? Okay. If not, we will go to reports of officials, utility accountant.
Our new employee started on Friday for a few days. She's worked Friday all day. She's working tomorrow and Wednesday. She did give her 2-week notice, and her last day will be this next Friday. So she should be starting with us a week from today, permanently. But she was able to take some vacation off, so she would be in with Kylie while Kylie's still here, and she's still here. She's due the 16th, and she was possibly gonna be induced on the 9th, but they pushed that off now until the 15th as of this morning. So we can hopefully still plan on her being around till around the 15th, unless the baby decides otherwise. So we have, we're glad that we have some time to have her train the new person, new Pam. We have new Pam and old Pam.
Original Pam or old?
Well,
Original.
Original and new.
although it does work, she's older, so you know, whatever. But the new Pam is working out real well. It's just one day, it was just amazing how much different she is from the previous person that we had hired. So much more outgoing and seems to be catching on real quick. So I think that we're on a good track. We have a lot better vibes on this one. So, other than that, we're just plugging along. Not much going on.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Lori? If not, Nick?
We had 2 outages this month. One was at a house 350 North Fairfield. We had an underground fault. So that night we put a temporary line, got them back up and running in about a half hour. Went out the next following day to fault find it. We dug up 3 spots that our fault finder took us to, which each time did not bring us to a break in the line. And then because the wire was buried to about 6 feet, we ended up just putting in a new line and backing in, because it was a short, about 35-foot secondary service. We just put a new service in for that and got it back up and running within a couple days of normal operation. But about a half-hour outage and then another 10-minute outage to get converted back to the new one. Then we had a bigger, significant outage on May 10th. That affected the eastern portion of the city. We had a fuse operating the fuse cabinet. This was due to, it was one of the
hot 3 days that we got that were in the 90s. And the fuse operated because it was an undersized fuse for feeding the system the way we had it fed. It was a normal open, which means it's usually where you have an open point circuit. And they're supposed to be engineered to be able to close those opens in to make it become a normal close while we had the North Island, South Island construction taking place. With that fuse cam, you can't see the fuses unless you pull them out, and you can't do that without creating an outage. So I was unfortunately in Madison already for a conference, and Shane came out, and I ended up driving back from Madison, and we were able to find the issue, but it took longer for us to feel comfortable closing in the fuse because we were getting some backfeed voltage. Some houses had 3 lights on, so we had backfeed coming back from somewhere. Well, it turns out Glass Boss has a Delta type, dry type transformer inside the building, which was creating some backfeed onto our primary cable. And so once we figured out what was causing that, we ended up putting a larger size fuse in and got everybody back up and running. With that, the Highland project is completed. We got that fully energized. We're going to start taking down the overhead wire now that that's fully operational. We got Easto being fed from a different way in preparation for our construction to take place in the next few weeks. Sounds like 2 weeks. With that, Charter has separated from us and are going by themselves now, not jointly, because they felt that the prices for the service drops were too high, even though all the services are in the driveways, so they have to cut open concrete, they have to bore in every service. So I don't know what Charter is expecting to achieve by going separately from us, but that's their choice. They can go separately. But we'll be starting ours with AT&T in the next few weeks. We hired a summer help position. Hopefully he can start next week Monday, depending on how HR operation goes with Pam, and he cleared his background check and has to do a drug screening. So hopefully next week Monday we'll have him started. Like I talked earlier, we worked on the jail water meters. We're in the process of working with water wastewater guys to get that up and running. We have another ATC outage planned. American Transmission Company, they have to do another fix on a switch out in Nails Brothers Field that they weren't able to do in spring because they didn't want to destroy their field. So now that they have their hay cut, we have an outage planned for the 9th, so this week's Thursday. We have to backfeed our industrial substation, and with that we need to notify one of our customers, Bullseye, to monitor their voltage. We will be monitoring with them, but they're the largest customer out when we're being fed that way. So they're in jeopardy of some potential small voltage drop with this. But that should only be a day ordeal. I did talk to ATC too to see if it's possible in the future to have an additional switch added to the transmission system, because this is the only substation that we have that's on the system that we can't isolate the transmission and kill our substation. All the other ones have switches out on the transmission lines themselves before they get to the substations. And for some reason, the industrial substation was set up where the transmission bypasses, and then you got 2 taps that go into our substation. So isolating that substation is the only way to keep any backfeed and come back onto the transmission, and then they have to open up another open point on the transmission. So hopefully down the road we can get something added so we don't have to continue to backfeed a substation like this, and it's beneficial for them as well. And then we only had 4 disconnects this month. They're all back on. And that's it.
questions for Nick? If not, Peter?
All right, want to review, discuss, and possibly approve, well, number 3 generator project. We have, in the past, we had an agreement with Dodge County Highway Department to use their portable generator for, but we ran a couple test runs, and we kind of would like, we got an agreement from them that we can do that, we just have to fill out the agreement, and, he wanted to have, Dan come out and help us hook up that generator. So, I've got that paperwork, and as far as, getting all the bids and prices and everything, Alex has been, doing that extensively, so he kind of has a presentation on that.
Okay, so I think everyone has a handout of sorts that I prepared. Basically, the DNR was under the impression that we had backup power there, and we don't. The Army generators that are currently stored in Nick's transformer were what we had, right? But those haven't left that cage in long time. 7 years? Right. And we're not supposed to have them there anyway.
Yeah, we're not supposed to be storing things in our substation.
Correct. So there is the need, the DNR is requiring us to do this, to get something. Like Peter mentioned, we can form an agreement with Dodge County to rent their unit, potentially if it does work, but you're not exactly first on the list. You know, it wouldn't be our equipment. But that would work in the meantime to satisfy their requirement. So the option we would like to go with is with a Cummins unit. If you've noticed around any municipal installations, they're largely Cummins powered. They make a really high quality unit, and we're largely impressed with their specs. Hogan Electric was actually referred to us from the Cummins rep themselves. They do a ton of water and wastewater work. They've done, like it says, over 200 of these units in different lift stations and water plants. They did the Slinger wastewater treatment plant, complete wastewater plant upgrade. They've done a ton of municipal work. So, they know our business, they know what they're doing. I'm really confident in their abilities. Like even talking to LW Allen, our SCADA provider, he knew our reps for SCADA and our reps knew him. So he's the guy that knows what's going on. But essentially, obviously, some of you have extensive electrical knowledge, so I can go as in depth as you want me to. But I'll start in short that the panel is original to 1966. It's a dinosaur. It's improperly wired. There's code violations. It needs to be. It makes it extremely difficult for the installation. That said, there's 2 routes we can go. If you go into options 1 or 2, it'll break it down specifically. Option 1, being our preferred route, is to just completely replace the electrical panel within the building, and that simplifies the wiring process dramatically, takes care of any code violations, prepares everything to be done the right way, right away, and makes serviceability in the future much more doable. But obviously that comes at a price, which you'll see in the middle. Basically, we can shuffle funds around to make it work this year for an initial phase to get the bulk of the wiring done. But then, when considering there's a considerable lead time on the generator unit, we would be able to potentially budget in this next year's budget to pay for the generator unit itself separately. so we would have to budget, I mean, potentially about 35,000 to pay for the unit then, once that would arrive and install. So we would be able to completely rewire the building, get the new generator and do everything the right way, but we would just have to make an agreement that we would budget for it next year to pay for the balance of that bill. The other option is make it work, which is we could come in largely close to the monies that we have already, but the odds that change orders happen, things don't work the way they're supposed to, are always high. So odds are we're still gonna have to come up with more money anyway. And then you're stuck with a dinosaur that if anything else breaks in the future, like the main breaker goes out and we can't replace it anyway, you're gonna wind up spending more money to fix it then as well. And you're talking about breakers that we can't get anymore. So at best, they said you basically have to send it out, refurbish your main breaker, and hope that it works then. So it's pretty much, do you want to invest in it, get something that do it right the first time, or make it work and then keep skating by, you know, which, I mean, I get that 35,000 is a lot of money, but, then at least it's proper.
Does the DNR require automatic transfer? I thought all we had to do is have auxiliary power there, it didn't
Right.
necessarily
They
have to
don't.
be triggered automatically.
They don't, I don't believe they do.
Cause that's where the
That's why we
majority of
got-
costs are coming from.
That's why we got away with having the trailer mounted units thus far.
With the manual transfer
Right,
switch.
correct. But actually, quite honestly, the units themselves were not that costly. The transfer switch, I believe, was around $4,000 or $5,000. So, and the total bill from Cummins directly was only like 35,000. But it's just so much of this is in copper, wiring, cabinets, and labor.
Well, I can tell you that with working on that low voltage trip main breaker in that well building, we wanna get rid of that. That's caused Nick issues and outage calls, you know, routinely over the last decade, I would say.
Yeah, and that's, if we left it in and we went the cheaper route, it would still be there. And then we would have to manually, every time there was an outage, we would have to manually switch it off of generator power because that will have pulled.
Right.
So you're gonna have a generator sit and run. Either you're gonna pay per call in or you're gonna let it sit and run for 12 hours before you show up in the morning. You know, so it's,
And the other thing too is if they redo all the electrical, I mean, if we ever have to do some kind of upgrade or anything in that well house, at least everything would be up to code then.
right, it's easy.
So you're
to
not,
get
you
onto.
either spend the money now or you spend the money later is basically what it comes down to, right?
This system that was put together was like a unit system. They had a huge cabinet where the main breaker is in with a lot of wasted space, with solid busing, separate meter for the domestic loads with inside the building, lighting loads and what have you, separate meter to meter the pump and what have you, just for recording purposes, I think back then, that's the reason it was done, but there's not much you wanna salvage anymore in that well room up there. I'm in favor of cleaning it all up. How we set that generator up was to get something there that we had no backup and what have you, so, we knew it wasn't exactly kosher, but it was safe and it
Made it
worked
work for
and,
the time
yeah,
being.
and, that's why I asked, you know, if you really wanted to cheap out, you just hang on and put a generator on the slab outside the building and
And you
continue to
Yeah, you
kick
could.
it in when you need to, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. The automatic transfer is nice, but that's always subject to problems too, you know, so. Either way, you're gonna get alert when that trip's over.
Well, right, because of power
Yeah.
fail in the building itself.
That SCADA system will pick up on that. But yeah, that main breaker, I think that's a 600 amp main breaker.
400.
400 amp main breaker with a low voltage trip on it that you have to keep an isolated circuit energizing that low voltage trip. So anytime you get get a phase that goes down or whatever, it picks up on that, drops that breaker out, and then you're dead in the water, and sending calls for help out. So, yeah, I'm in favor of getting that thing up to today's standards, because that's been piecemealed for so long.
Yeah, it's,
I mean, even the soft start starter now is tied onto that,
there's
just
not a
as,
single bucket in the panel that's used the way it was supposed to. So
No, it was-
everything's lugged onto the busing, and it's all been added on to and taken away from,
and of course, that 66 year that you're talking about, that was just for the original well building, and then Ross, the iron filter got added on when? The 70s sometimes, or early? Okay. Cause that was a two-part
That was-
construction, as you know.
that was the date on the main breaker, so I guess what I'll tell you.
So either you bite the bullet
Later.
now or later, and
It's not
it
gonna
looks,
get any, it's not gonna get any
Well, and
cheaper.
if at any point we have to add treatment equipment or anything else, different chemical feeds, any kind of equipment, you're gonna want that ability, you know, now, instead of saying, oh, I need to add on all this, you know, extra electrical capacity.
Well, and right now, the electrical stuff is what, like a year out for some of that
Well,
stuff?
lead time is,
Mhm.
so that's, it actually
Year,
kind of
2 years.
played into our favor, cause there were companies with less lead time for generators, but it's like, well, we don't have the money to pay for it anyway. So, it's like, it kinda works out this way, we can actually just build it into our budget for next year if we wanna go that route, and just plan on spending the money then, instead of.
Well, part of it would be spent this year, right, to do the,
Right,
The money that was
we would spend the
budgeted,
money that we
yeah.
have budgeted,
right?
plenty of it, but,
what do we have for site prep on here?
Site prep would be done by Scott and his crew. Basically, we were gonna do trenching and set up forms for concrete and do asphalt, repair.
Where are you going with this, or what,
It's gonna be right in front of the building, so north,
Right along the drive there.
right along the driveway.
what's the matter with the slab where it's at now?
That needs to be left open and accessible so that the
There's
well.
a hatch there in case they have to pull the
The
well
well
up.
service.
We gotta bring a crane over there.
Yeah, should be able to clear that.
The trucks, what our rep told us is we can't do that. Basically, his service equipment needs to be able to get through that false wall, so if they have to pull that out, they can.
So you're gonna be going where the basement entrance goes down?
Just north from there, yep. Basically bordering that. We could have done across the driveway on the hill, but I didn't really like the idea of considering drainage and everything else. You don't want erosion to happen and your generator falls off, or anything weird, you know. It's the nicest, flattest, closest place. basically.
So you're gonna have to go around that to get the basement access for the filter room, if you wanna use that outside entrance.
I mean, we would leave that entrance existing, but we're gonna run wire, we're gonna pull up the asphalt, run wire through the driveway itself. Alright,
Just a trench.
Yeah, run a trench.
I thought they'd be piping it right through the well room wall. Well, that's gonna all be conduit from the slab in.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't that be part of the electrical contractor's job?
That was an effort basically for us to save money. I mean, they could have, but I would have to rebid it. And I can tell you, it's probably gonna be more than that, you know?
What's a pretty hefty figure he's got there now?
Well, that's with, there was wiggle room in that number Scott gave us, basically, it was three guys for.
No, I'm not worried about that number, I'm talking about the.
Oh, for the contractor, correct.
Right.
Yeah, so we figured at least save a little bit of money, cause what Scott came up with was not a lot of money compared to. But yeah, he said typically the installations they do full, I mean, you tell them, I want a generator here, and time checking, that's it. That's typically what they did, but he did allow us to do the site prep.
So you just solicited these bids on your own? Cause this is gonna have to be bid out publicly because of the dollar amount. Anything over $25,000 for a project like this would have to be bid out.
How's that work?
You gotta put a bid spec together, publicize it in the paper at least twice, and, yeah, that's law.
I was under the impression that if it was already budgeted
Yeah, it was
for-
budgeted for 65,000, why were we able to budget for it then?
Right.
And not told that we had to do
That
it?
was just a dollar amount we
That's
put into the
approving-
budget
that's
for buying
approving money,
equipment.
it's not approving.
Right, that's the
Go
budget
ahead.
for
Oh,
the
would've
amount of
been
money
nice
you can
to know, I
spend,
guess.
but it's not gonna do with the project.
I mean,
itself.
it isn't that fact that they're not gonna resubmit or whatever. I mean, we just, to let you know, we just did this for the garbage bid. We posted it twice and nobody responded. Had to go out and reach out for them, but at least you had your butt covered by doing your public bidding, because that's a letter of the law that you have to do that.
Okay. Well, I guess what I'll tell you is that, well,
I know you're fighting a timeline here.
it doesn't matter, but it is what it is. So essentially, if we don't put that order in, it's 10% on the generator tomorrow. So it's
That's a shame.
an extra $3,500 if we don't sign on it tomorrow. And then if we
Is
don't-
that just to purchase the generator?
the generator unit itself, yes.
So you can do that.
But we could purchase the generator without bidding the job.
Right, the unit, so the issue is that the unit pricing, they gave us favorable pricing to use their preferred contractor. It was contractor pricing.
No.
And so then also the generator itself total was like 35,000 to them. So that's still over.
Tell them when we put the bids out, come in low, we got you.
Yeah, but that's after tomorrow, then the
That's
10%
after tomorrow,
already
it's
goes on.
already
I
another
understand that.
$35. If it's not done by, September, Cutler Hammer's gonna be another 15%, so that's gonna be another $3,000. So, it's a pretty, and it's, I hate to say it, because we should have done this in May, well, if we could have anyway, but Cutler Hammer already hit us with $3,000, but we weren't ready, basically, so it would have been $3,000 less if we did it last month, but scheduled price increases are killing us here.
Oh, hey,
And
I
that's-
deal with it every day.
Transformers just went up another $5,000.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Alright. So can we approve a route, and then just, I don't know if you can agree to budget whatever for next year, and then just agree to solicit bids to be approved, or, set the groundwork for this somehow.
So does this have to go to the council?
No.
No. So it just has to go through the commission, but we still have to have, it has to be publicized and get bids
Yeah.
that way is what you're saying.
Yep. You'd never have an issue unless there was somebody out there that was in this business that spotted that you're doing this and said, well, how come that wasn't publicized? I would have bid
Right.
on that or whatever. So
Well, and
that's-
it's
So
like,
it's still the law.
That's law, right?
so like is there any kind of spec we can make, cause like, how do we choose which, do we have the ability to choose providers?
Well, you take that guy's bid and write that as the spec.
Or
Well,
he can
right.
help you out with that
I,
bid spec as far as.
well, we can come up with the scope, but
You don't have to pick the lowest bid.
the hard part is I just don't wanna have to pick the low bid.
You're not
'Cause
required
it's
to,
You're not required to.
not required
Right,
to.
so we can still pick that
But you
bid
have to bid
regardless,
it.
but it has to be bid.
So are you able to do have the commission approve the project for the not to exceed, and then that way you can,
Well, you've got enough money budgeted this year for what you wanna do this year, right?
Close to, at least within a few thousand. If we move some money.
Monies around. I'm not trying to be difficult here,
No,
I just wanted to
No,
make
I
you.
know.
I know I had to kinda cut you off the other day when I was up in the bucket, and it
Yeah.
was getting to be kind of a long-winded
Well,
conversation,
no, and I know how
but-
that works, it's just one of those things like, I wish I'd have known this.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
think part of the problem is,
No, we're all learning.
Well, I think, you know, like from our department standpoint, none of us have ever really had to deal with this, so we're
That's-
coming across a lot of things where it's like, well, we didn't know that, I mean, you know, we had a conversation too, well, I talked to a lady from the emergency management or government management office too, and she said that a lot of times for stuff like this, there's grants and things available,
Yeah.
well, how do you find out about that? And after talking with Megan today, she said MSA should be doing that for us, and it's like, well, that would've been nice to know too, you know, I mean, but
With a cost. but-
that's what I'm saying though, I mean, and that's what I told her, I said, look at the money we're paying MSA already for services, and we still haven't seen a shovel go in the ground for a plant upgrade or anything like that, and, I mean, we're talking thousands of dollars a month, I mean, the last thing we need to do is burden them with digging up more grant money for things like this, you know what I'm saying, but that's, I mean, it's just rough, cause you got the DNR coming down on one side, and we got all this other stuff, and we're, you know, really green at this, and we're trying to learn as we go too, you know?
Sure.
Alex,
So-
this price increase is just for the generator itself. And the
Directly to
generator, you're telling me, for
Yes.
the generator itself,
Contractor pricing is $35,000.
35,000. But in order to get that $35,000, you have to purchase it by tomorrow, or tell them you'll take
Yeah,
it.
but we're
Through,
right away.
through that
I have to
contract.
agree, yeah.
Yeah.
Through the contract is the
Cause
problem.
that's the contract
Cause
pricing.
it's with him carrying his generator on his liability.
It's like, if I hire Bailey's Concrete, that's Bailey Concrete's concrete pricing through, well, it's not Dodge anymore, so I don't have that anymore, but that's usually how
Right.
they have their
I mean,
contract
if we were
pricing.
purchase the unit, it would be more.
Say they have to use so many yard.
Generators
yeah.
per, yeah.
Right, because he does a ton of these units through them, so.
And the sad part of it, if you go to Cummings Direct, there might be a municipal discount too that you might be able to cash in on, but I don't know that for a fact,
What the contractor told us is he was reluctant to tell us what the pricing he got was, because I'll tell you, comparing to a Generac unit, it was almost the same for a considerably less quality unit.
yeah.
Because if we were to go direct from Generac, would have been within hundreds, whereas he got this better unit for the same amount.
Oh, yeah, there's no difference, or no comparison there, I can tell you that.
Because that's, a direct Generac was like 33,
Generac's made for households.
34,000, so.
You know, I guess are we able to go back to him and say, we'd really like to go with you, but law requires, because we're a municipality, that it has to take a certain course.
Well, I'm sure he'll
Is
adjust.
he willing to work
He'll
with us?
adjust the price,
Well,
it's just, his hands are tied right now, cause, Cummins is gonna increase every day.
Right.
Like, that's what I'm finding in my transformer, like, since you wanted a quote for a new transformer, it was it was $17,000 a week ago. It's $22,000 now, and they just can't hold you to more than a day worth of a estimate right now.
And they had 60-day quotes, and he said now they're not honoring any more than 30-day quotes, and it's.
Probably gonna
lucky
get less
every-
as you go.
Lucky
every
if you
day
see
is
that
moving.
anymore, 30
Yeah.
days. 30 days is generous right now.
They give me 3 days for wire and pipe, that's all I got.
And that's, some of these quotes, he built in extra thousands in wiring, cause I know it's not gonna be the same, you know? So I don't, obviously being on candid camera, we can't make an agreement saying we're going to pick him as a contractor and unit so that he could keep the, put the unit on order anyway. You know, you
No,
can't make it
no,
under the table to say
no.
we're gonna do it through him, so it is what it is. He's just gonna have to rebid it for more money, and then we're probably gonna have to revisit the funding portion of it, sadly to say, but at least we have the scope ironed out and know what we're looking for.
How long does the, bid have to be going up for the advertisement, how long?
2 publications, I think,
For how long of a time period? And is
just,
there-
just been in the paper twice, I believe.
okay. So like a week's time or one time? they
Yeah,
have-
I think you but that, you should probably research too to find out for sure.
They have to have their bids in by a certain date or
Right.
whatever.
Normally, they put them in for like 3 days, you know, twice, a week apart or
Does
something.
it have to be publicized if you reached out to 3 or 2 other bids? And that's, well, the other hard part too is you're talking up to a year lead time, so for a drag our feet, it's like,
You may be 24, huh?
yeah. So, that's what it is here.
Well, if it's 2 publications, can't you just put it in 2 separate newspapers and whatever the issue date is?
I think one's gotta be 1 week and one's gotta be the other week, week following or something like that. But I think, thinking more about it, I think it's only 1 day each publication.
Right, but how long do you give them to get the bids in?
You set the time, 20 days, 15 days, a month, whatever you feel comfortable with. So
A week.
Well, you're not gonna get much response, but
Well,
maybe,
you know.
maybe that's what you want, I don't know.
I'm just throwing it
Put it in
out.
paper.
All right.
So, there's nothing we really approve at this point, cause we gotta approve the bid once it comes in, and then at that time, we can approve funding, so.
Well, you said on Cummings, was anybody else bidding the Cummings?
No, cause I contacted the Cummins provider directly, and basically he gave us the contractor that he preferred working with.
Okay.
That he thought would fit the scope of the project.
Maybe you wanna reach back out to him and find out if there's somebody else out there that, a second choice or whatever, and
This guy's, his pre-qual list was, for our scope, it was perfect. I mean, he said that for the multi-million-dollar Waukesha water plant upgrade in Waukesha, obviously, he was one of 3 contractors that actually pre-qualified for it,
okay,
like in the state. Obviously, that's a really big job, so
yeah.
I mean, their resume is very good.
The price will give it.
Well,
Obviously,
Right?
and that's, I mean, like I had on here, you know, even working with Nate, with United, which we've worked with for a long time, he was the same price, basically. So, we could go with a less expensive unit with him and save money, but it's the same difference.
I prefer the other one.
Right. Sorry, we can't help you.
No.
Yeah.
All I can tell you is it's just gonna cost you, that's it.
As per usual, everything costs more. All right. So that is on hold. Project update.
Projects, yeah. And I talked about some of the things that last month we were out there with the garage, with their electrical engineer, talking about the, equipment and the programming, lead times and everything. We received a report from Northern Pipe, they cleaned and televised in the northwest part of the city, about 16,000 linear feet. Everything looked good. A couple of the manholes need attention. We'll budget those with the other 9 that I found earlier this spring. They found 30 laterals that should be inspected. So we're working on identifying all the homes through the I guess not using the tape, but actually their footages from manhole to manhole, and you walk it off with a wheel, and it basically tells you where the house is. So I'll get all those together and then put together a letter for the homeowners to make arrangements with either Northern Pipe or another contractor to televise their laterals.
Some of these laterals though, Peter, were leaking, what'd you say, 2 to, up to what, 8 gallons of?
Yeah, something like that. So even with a conservative estimate, if they're leaking a gallon a minute, that roughly comes out to about 42,000 gallons of just water from groundwater or whatever a day. So, and that's just a portion of the city. So 32% in our losses for wastewater. So, then the next thing was 216 Fair Street. PH&E plumbing contractor was there on the 24th of last month to reroute the water and sewer service to be compliant with the city ordinance. They had been working throughout the day. I ended up getting a call from Brandon. He stated that there was no water when he turned on the curb stop. So I went over there and sure enough, no water came out of that. There was a valve up the street, which I thought maybe that the line might have been tapped on to that. Opened it up and still there was no water. Looked at the plans and it showed a 144 linear foot section that was buried in the terrace, and it was never connected to the water main. So what we ended up having to do was round up some garden hoses and a pool meter, and we hooked it up to the cold water faucet on the washing machine inside of the electric shop, and ran the hose across their yard and underneath the fence and hooked up to the water spigot to get them water temporarily. So, the next day called Digger's Hotline for emergency ticket and scheduled with Town and Country to have them do the excavation and make the live tap the next day. They made that tap and they had water at that house before noon. So that was that. That same day we had Vitech here to clean out the north waste basin. And the south one is going to be done in a couple of weeks. And then we were talking about the water heater at the jail. So that's all I have.
Peter, who's responsible for not connecting?
Whoever buried it in the ground about 2005.
MSA engineered it though, correct?
Well, that's what they had on the print, that this line was buried for future use. It was never connected to the main. It should have been tapped into the main,
Yeah.
and it was crimped at the curb stop, past the curb stop, 2 feet into the property.
I put Mike Lau and Jason Lau both on notice if you are supposed to be sending those bills, anything related to those
Yeah, we've been
two
keeping track of
MSAs.
our time and everything, so. for that.
So, contractors' bills come in, don't pay them, send them over to MSA. I voiced my displeasure. Haven't talked to Mike Lau for a while there, and I think he thought it was a social call. I cut it short with him and said how I was disappointed. I says, we were billed, memory serves me, like $9,800 for that service. And I said, Mike, you remember I questioned why you ran 1.5 inch pipe for that short a distance? He said, I remember that. And he says, I thought you were gonna tell me it wasn't turned on the corporation tied to the main. And I says, no, I says, from what I'm finding out now, I says, it ended in the boulevard, never crossed the street to get over to where the shut-off was supposed to be. And Peter says it even was written on the print that way.
It was written.
That was to be tied on at a later date.
Fine print.
Well, that's not what we asked for, and that's certainly not what we got. Or I said, we wanted an active water service. We didn't know that was gonna be tied on 17 years later. It could have been tied on within 6 months, later
Well,
or
you got the
whatever.
hole open, why not just do it while you're there?
It was supposed to be a live service, that when they were ready to swing the services from the house in front on East Oak Grove Street, all they would have had to do is open up the valve.
Was that road supposed to go under construction in the next few years if they just stopped there in preparation
The worst
for
part
that?
is the sewer was done correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
So they did half of it right.
Right. I mean, both the water and sewer ran from the house on East Oak Grove Street through the backyard, and boy, that can't be very deep, because in the basement of the front house, that thing is at about chest height, and pitching up towards the house in the back, so that can't be but 18 inches below the ground, 2 feet maybe?
It was 3 or 4 feet, it was,
Well, then the ground
probably
must
wasn't-
go up because it goes underneath the cellar windows in the front house there, you know,
it
so.
wasn't deep, but it wasn't any crazy shallow.
So long story short, I did voice my displeasure, and Jason said to me, you know, send the bills over when you get them, we'll take it up then, so. So make sure anything that's cost related to that FUBA,
PHE, everybody.
it's, yeah, and there's gonna be road restoration there.
One is, well, are any of PHE's invoices gonna be to us? That was homeowner cost.
Yeah, hopefully that'll all go
That's
there.
everything on our end was
But
through
yeah,
town and
PHE
country.
would be to the homeowner.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, everything for us was in town and country.
Unless he had extra hours because of this,
Well, they probably did,
Yeah.
he was there a long time.
but see how it pans out if he bills it to the customer and it all works out, I guess. We are gonna have a sizable bill there, I would imagine. Now, you actually did a main tap, or did you find the tail at the valve, that the shut off?
Main tap.
So now the
They
only,
went to the north.
the only valve that'll be on there is in front of their house inside the terrace area, which is less confusion that way anyway,
Yeah.
you know, so. But didn't they also on the blueprint and also read that there was a valve there for that? A shut off for that, across the street?
No.
Okay.
The map was right, I mean, everything about the map was right.
But it wasn't what we
But
ordered.
that wasn't what we asked for.
No, absolutely.
We'll have to draw a little line from the end there over to the.
Update your map.
Yeah, for
Use a red
everything,
pen.
but,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, you took pictures and measurements and.
And I don't know, Lori, I don't know how far back the paper records go here. I suppose trying to find an invoice from 2005 is gonna be hellacious.
That's burned. Every.
For what, 10?
Yeah, it's 7 for certain things and it's 10 years for other
Yeah,
things.
so they would kind of keep it like 10.
So, I'm in charge of burning stuff, that one's long gone, I can tell you right now.
If it would've been at the wastewater plant, it's probably still there.
Yeah.
Well, there's gotta be a record of a check cut with a line item for water service for that address.
Well, depends on who's inputting into the system, how much detail we put in there.
In 2005, it's hard to tell.
Anybody have any questions for Peter? If not, we will move on. Nick and I went to the WPPI meeting. That's where we came up with the grants that Matt talked about. That was about, otherwise,
Board of directors meeting.
Board of Directors meeting. And financially, WPPI is very well off. We voted on a bond referendum that will save them $2 million a year in interest. So, I mean, it's kind of worthwhile, I thought. It's a lot of interest. But otherwise, there was reports from procurement people and everything else. And they opened up the orientation. There's one the 9th of June. I'm looking for one in September, which will probably try and get some people to go to.
Yeah, they did a projection on wholesale power and generation, and it's pretty scary outlook right now as far as generation. I don't know if you guys have been reading articles about possible blackouts in Midwest. I don't foresee load shedding happening in a small town, Juneau. They'll typically go to a larger city, Milwaukee, Madison, Green Bay, things like that. but the PPI has been doing quite a bit of load shed trainings where we have a document that shows customers that have generation backups that can go on generators to shed load. But yeah, things are looking kind of sketchy with the push for green generation and lack of coal plants now, and demand increases that continue to happen with EV, and so there's gonna be a lot of changes in the next 10, 15 years in the electric industry. But I'm not ready for it. No one's ready for it.
I was gonna say, I don't think anybody's ready for it.
The electric vehicles are just gonna cause
Oh, yeah.
a whole lot of problems.
Well, the load shedding isn't such an issue like maybe 10 years ago when we didn't have some of these transmission lines completed from state to state. Then you had the rolling brownouts where you were required to put up with an outage for a period of hours and whatever. It got very close but never hit here. But yeah, that's something that, you know, first you're gonna have to talk to industry and see how willing they are to shut down so that John Q. Public can still maintain electricity and whatever, but
So they can charge their electric car.
that all affects their bottom line too, so.
And batteries, when they burn out, where are they going with them?
I can hear you.
The
You're just talking.
batteries are, the battery replacement, after they replace them, only 30% of it's recyclable. 30, the rest of it, they're gonna have to find some place to dump it.
Or figure out a way to recycle it,
Or-
going into the
yeah.
future.
And that says a lot for, you know, everybody's gonna have electric vehicles, but there's no thought in what we're gonna do with the batteries when they burn out. You can't charge them indefinitely. So, the problem is there. So, that's all I have. Mr. Mayor?
I was approached by the gentleman that's doing development work out in the Wild Goose Park. I guess he kinda answered my questions there. Probably 20 years ago, we probably had a dewatering system out there that the developer deemed it was cost prohibited to keep running. I don't know if we got any records on what the consumption was on that. That's right across from the sewer lift to the east.
Nothing that I've seen,
But I hear he's very interested in seeing if the city would partner with him. He has bought several lots beyond the two that he built houses in. He seems to be a high-quality developer, and two nice houses that are sold already. And the wealth kind of gets shared every time somebody puts a hole in the ground. Your sump pump runs a little less. But there is a master system out there that's supposed to dewater that quadrant out there. But at the time the recession hit, this was all in place, and the bottom fell out of home building, and White Pines Development couldn't afford to keep the pump running. So the meter was pulled and the pump was shut down. This is a direct pipe system right into our storm sewer, which would dramatically help the people that live out there as far as their reducing their pumping needs of their sump pump. So I've got him coming to Plan Commission. Gonna come up with some kind of agreement, or hopefully, you know, some kind of compromise. The other thing would be do an assessment to those property owners out there to help pay for the metering costs to keep that thing rolling and what have you, but,
What was the guy's name that had that account before?
Heckovich. Dave Heckovich was the CEO from White Pines Development, or White Pines Housing, or whatever it was.
So we were told, I don't remember who, that those pumps were pulled because they were not serviceable anymore. They
Oh.
went until they broke, so they're not currently there either.
Oh, well, then you're telling me something I don't know then, because,
You can pull the lid off, they ain't there.
okay.
Yeah, those haven't been running since I've been here. I mean,
Oh, no. No, I'm
haven't been
thinking,
long.
Didn't you
talk to Scott about that?
Well, this has been an ongoing thing for a long time. Well, you were there
Yeah.
at the beginning.
Yeah, I calmed him down the first hole he dug, the water was coming in faster. So I gave him some tips on how he had to overdig them and put breaker run down. He said that did work, but he says I'm interested in buying more lots, or I think he said he bought more lots.
Well, did they close? Because he was in a big argument with the realtors on how to justify this. Or
Yeah,
how to-
yeah, well, he calmed down after things started going his way and whatever, but first day he was pretty irate when you called me to come down there and talk to him.
How
But
is,
it-
Nelson's basement? Is any of that water getting directed towards his house?
But we had a customer complaint actually not long after the fact when he was pumping water from his new basements.
Mhm.
One of the houses on,
Tom Mills.
Tom Mills,
yeah, that,
It's got the pump, it's got the hose coming out of the ground.
He called and he calmed down too. I mean, it just was the type of thing that he was speculating, is really what
But isn't
happened.
that's a solid, they just put a new pipe in
Yep.
all the way down.
Increased the size of the pipe crossing the street there from
Yeah,
one side
so
out.
That's going
Highland
directly
the
into
other
that
side.
pipe.
Right, so, you can't have his cake and eat it too, you know, I mean, I did tell the builder to divvy up his pumping between the North Street and that ditch, which he did do and whatever, so that probably decreased it and kept Tom calm, whatever, but anyway, long story short, there's a potential for somebody that wants to hit while the iron is hot here with the housing wants and needs right now, so fill up that subdivision, I think, we'll talk about it at planning commission but I was hoping from the utility commission that there'd be a record on what that costs to run those pumps, but there's no pumps, it's a moot point then, I guess, so.
Maybe we can see what, we can pull up maybe an old account with that name attached, if it transferred over when we changed over to North Star, whether or not that information did. I'll look up his name.
would the utility be responsible for them then?
No, that would be like a city entity more so than anything. You don't handle groundwater, you
The
don't
city
handle.
doesn't know pumps though, I mean,
No,
largely, but who pays for it, where does it come from?
well,
This is charter.
that's what's all gotta be determined and worked out, you know. I'm just going by what he asked of me, and I think it's not unreasonable for a community to help a developer out in that respect, as long as it doesn't, you don't have to sell the farm to do it, so. So, that, you answered my question. Nick burns all the records after 10 years, I guess, so. It's all on tape now, so.
That's what the PSC tells us
So
to,
the statute
so.
of limitations is, you can do it.
That's all I got.
All right. Any old business? Any new business? Wednesday,
This week?
this week Wednesday.
Well, it's going, does it have to be published?
Yes,
No,
yes.
we will not have a quorum.
Why won't you?
There's 4 people.
Oh, that's it.
And I'm one of them.
And there would be only 2 from the commission.
Okay.
So it's not a quorum.
Just making sure.
I checked that one out already. All right. If not, I will entertain a motion.
One question. So, things need to be bid out over 25,000
Projects.
projects, not equipment.
That's a gray area.
So.
We as a commission have asked people to come in with 3 bids, and the city as a whole says,
Okay.
come to me with 3 bids, so that we don't just go, well, this is the one I like, I want this
Right,
one, and we
right.
don't have enough information, so
Okay.
give us
Well,
a
no,
good, a better,
I
a
guess
best.
I'm just trying to translate into other things we may have purchased or, like with our lift station 2 upgrade, that's
Mhm.
not exactly,
But sometimes if it's an emergency repair, you can get by, you can get around
so
that.
it's, I guess,
Well,
basically
it's gonna
how
be an
we're-
emergency generator, is it not? Is that a gray area?
That's not.
I could go hit the breaker with a hammer.
what's on record, too, we realize that.
There you go, Alex.
Well,
I was
So-
just asking
no,
a question.
Well, just,
All right, need to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Cheryl, second by Bart to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion is carried, 7:40.